equally as excited about today's speaker, who I met through a mutual friend and heard her speak and read her book and loved every story in it. So, so impressed by her style and her grasp of an insight into human nature and what the heart of story is. So I'm excited to have her here. Lisa Cupolo, right over here. She's been a paparazzi photographer, an aid worker in Kenya, a script doctor in LA, and a literary publicist at HarperCollins in Toronto. That was last week. Her stories have been published in the Virginia Quarterly Review, Ploughshares, Narrative, the Idaho Review, and others. She holds a BA in philosophy from the University of Western Ontario. That's Canada. Not Ontario, California. A graduate degree in portrait photography from the London Institute and an MFA from the University of Memphis. She's lived all over the world, but currently resides in Southern California, where she teaches fiction writing at Chapman University. And I'm so pleased and honored to introduce to you today, Lisa Cupolo.
Hi, everybody. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I was going to ask if some of you could move up a bit. I'm used to teaching classes, and every time I have a class and there's a you don't have to, but I make everybody sit in a circle because I'm very into inclusivity and making sure that everybody feels included and part of the group and valued. So I guess I'll tell you a little bit more, like how do I have all this background, and then I have this book, and where do I come from, and who am I? I am Canadian. And I have had a lot of amazing jobs. I have always wanted to write. And I didn't come from an affluent family, so I always had to have jobs. And I was always terrified, like probably all of you are, and never felt worthy of, what am I going to say? Or is this good enough? And the fact that you guys are here, that you are in this room, that you're all writers, that many of you have way more books than this is my first book, although of course I have many in the drawer that never went anywhere, and 2 more that I have a memoir I'm working on and another novel that I think I've sold. But I am just like you, and it's the trust. The biggest thing is that you have to trust that you're here. And there's a reason that you're here and not sitting outside on this beautiful Saturday morning somewhere, right? In your garden or doing something else. Because I've gotten away. I mean, yes, I was a paparazzi photographer. I lived in London. I was a photographer for a very long time, but I was always writing in the side, So I really feel like it's so important to say that you are here because you're a writer. And I always start by talking about that because it really is an important thing. There's some kind of thing where you feel weird, and then for me, it's because I haven't written in a day. And if I don't write, the day isn't complete. And it doesn't mean you have to write a whole bunch, but what I like to say is you visit your writing. And I have a 16-year-old kid. I have an older husband. I have a very busy life. But I have to visit my work every day. And that's really, really important because then it's like you're a friend. You're going to see it. Even if you just read the opening paragraph 1,000 times. It really is important. More to say about that. But I am going to talk to you about conflict today. My book is a collection of short stories. I love to write the short story form. How many of you write short stories? Okay, wonderful. This will be good and valuable, I think. Because I teach at Chapman. I've been teaching for about 20 years now in different ways. And more recently, I've traveled. Can you hear me? Yeah.
That's better.
That's better. Okay, sorry. More recently with my book, I've traveled to, I did a conference last, Kenyan Writers Conference, which is really prestigious. I went to SCWA Writers Conference and taught there. The thing that I find in the classroom the most with short stories is there's an amazing character, there's great language, there's, I'm interested, but there's not enough conflict. And what is conflict? What is conflict? That's what I want to talk about. So I love, probably so many of you are Neil Gaiman fans. I was lucky to be his publicist in Toronto. You can ask me about that later. He's fabulous. But he says, a short story is the ultimate close-up magic trick. A couple of thousand words to take you around the universe or break your heart. And all of you can tell a story, right? All of you can tell a story. But to tell a story that's gonna open your heart, that's going to move you, right? So say you have, well, I'm not going to go there. Hold on one second. A novel tells us everything, right? A novel, you get sometimes breakfast in the morning with that person. But a short story just tells you one thing, right? So a novel has, imagine it's this whole stream. A short story comes at the side of a person, comes at the side. And so how are you going to tell that story in 5 if it's a flash fiction, or 12 or 18? That's about the range of stories I write. And just keep the interesting bits. Well, you got to edit like hell. That's what I say. You all know this, but have your character want something is the number one thing. You have to have your character want something. And a lot of times when I'm teaching, I say that to a student. This is really neat. You've got this great character. What do they want? And they're like, oh, well, they want this, 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 and this. And I said, well, it's not on the page. Yeah. It's not there, right? So many times it's in your head. And until you see that, and so one of my key things, which is show, not tell, which you're all following me, right? On show, not tell, you've read the books. So show, not tell, is basically show it in dialogue. Show it in the way the person, it's actions, like a movie. My thing is show and tell. Show and tell in that I'm a huge fan of declarative sentences saying, well, I'll tell you in my title story for my book, which is called Have Mercy on Us. And it's a biblical reference, but it's also a reference to a Chekhov story called Gooseberries, which is one of my favorites, and I teach. The title story called Have Mercy on Us starts with the line, can you hear me all? I just want to make sure. Okay. For months, Alina had been following Daryl. That's the opening line. For months, Alina had been following Daryl. And this opening line was not the first opening line, right? It had been something completely different. But for months, Alina had been following Daryl. This morning, when he came out of his ratty apartment looking foul like a cat, Alina was leaning against the hydro pole across the street. She kept still in her plain blue coat and Costco running shoes, playing words with friends on her flip phone. She hoped she appeared like a trick in his mind. Was she there or wasn't she? She imagined her presence created an awful feeling in him that he couldn't escape. Daryl was Claudia's boyfriend and the reason her daughter was in trouble. Daryl had knocked her up when the girl was only 17. That's a whole bunch of telling right there. But you're right in it. And for me, that was, as you know, you have pages and pages that you've written. And I find the telling is really the key thing. I think it's like my secret weapon in a way. I find so many people that are writing stories and say, I want the reader to, figure it out on their own. No, The way I teach it is you have to tell them. The reader needs to know as much as the writer. So all that explanation only adds more intrigue. You don't know really what this woman, Alina, is thinking in her mind too much, but you know she wants to protect her daughter and she's following this guy. And you want to see what happens next. Do you see what I mean? So that is kind of, for writing that story, and I won't say too much more about it, I started out with that idea of, like we all do, we start out with an idea for our stories, right? You think you've got it mapped out, beginning, middle, and end, but you don't really know until you keep writing. Robert Stone, he's a famous American author that, I don't know, people don't even know him anymore, but I love his work. He says, writing is like you're driving a car at night. You're driving a car at night, and you only can know as much as the headlights show you until you get to that spot, and then you know the next bit. It's so true. And so that's reassuring as well, because I don't believe in having the whole thing mapped out. All of us has a muse inside of us. We have a soul, we have a heart, we have this brain that takes over way too much, but we have ideas. And you have to trust that your ideas will come out and that you have something to say. And each of you has a unique story to tell, which is so beautiful. Because we are like, oh, I want to write like her. No, you have to write like you. And that's worthy. And it's like that whole thing of, I am enough, or whatever that whole thing is. It's true, I am enough as a writer. Everything that I don't know, I think it was Fitzgerald says, before you're 5 years old, you've had enough happen to you that you can write about for the rest of your life. And that is for sure. Okay. I talked about the declarative sentence. I really do think that's really important, for me anyway. And I think I have a reputation as being kind of a staccato writer. Like every single sentence I work on really, really hard. And I delete it. If every sentence isn't towards developing character or developing the plot, it has to go. None of these asides over here. If you've got an aside, I often take out that little, the kill your darlings from Flannery O'Connor when she said that, which means you take the something you're holding on to. Say you've got this great dialogue, but it really doesn't fit in. So you take it and you put it in another document, which I do, and I say, darlings, and I save it and I think, oh, I'm going to go back to that. I never, ever do. It's just over there. It's not, something that I'm ever going to use again. The other thing about the declarative sentences, and I'm only telling you this based on, I don't know what your writing's like or anything like that, but I find it's true 90% of the time, is confiding in the reader is a really key thing, to confide in the reader. Because it's like, hey, I want to tell you the story. Now lean in. Let's just sit together and I'll tell you the story. And I love that, because that's why we're all writers, really. We probably were readers young, or it's you want to write what you love to read. And for me, reading and writing has always made me feel less alone. When I was a kid, I was very ill. When I was 13, I got super sick, and my whole life changed. And I was in hospitals in my 20s and 30s, and had a really rocky time. But I also found so much comfort in writers and reading, and it just was like my safe space to go to. So I think we're always writing what we want to read, and thinking of the muse of your writer. And when you're traveling along that highway at night, let your characters speak. Let your characters speak. Sometimes when I'm writing and it seems like a very kind of elementary thing where somebody was wronged in a story, or I'm starting to write, I overhear a dialogue, because that's often for me how I find my stories. Overheard dialogue. When I teach my writing class at Chapman, I have them walk over to the little circle in orange. You guys know where that is, that fountain. And I have them sit and overhear a conversation, because at that fountain there's often, grandparents and a grandkid. There's, people floating around. I make them go sit and listen to people. And they're kind of freaked out, but it's a great exercise in learning dialogue and how people talk to each other. Which is a whole other conversation, is dialogue. Oh my gosh. When I was, does anybody know Elmer Leonard? If you like, yes. Okay, Elmer Leonard. I was his publicist in Toronto. Amazing. And he and I got along great, and just the smartest, coolest person as you imagine his work is, right? And how he is as a person. His tip for dialogue I'll give you, which is just has helped me so much, is, okay, you write out your dialogue, you think you got it right, and he says, delete every other line from each person. So skip what they say. And it's amazing because you end up seeing what's really there, and you didn't need to, it's like, of course we know, hi, how are you? You don't say all that, but you don't answer that question. You go on to the next thing. And if you write it out in the way that, how you think, it actually is the best tip. One of those like quick hacks. Try it. Yeah, so if you're writing out your dialogue, or you go visit a piece of dialogue you've already written in the story, delete the every other one of each person. Does that make sense?
Every other line.
Every other line. Yeah, every other line. Thank you. Thank you for clarifying. Yes, every other line. And you save that, and then also read it aloud, because dialogue you have to read aloud to see if it works. But it's a wonderful tip, and he gave me that, and that was great. As I was telling you about and this is just another one. I had all these points, but I hope I'm getting to them because I'm just going off here. But I think when I was telling you about that story, and I know you're all serious writers, about Alina, and she's following this guy, her daughter's boyfriend, who got her daughter, knocked her up, who got her into drugs. The story is not about how she gets this guy. The story, of course, is about Alina and who she is and why she's so, menaced and being so, her whole life is revolving around getting this guy. And so I tell you that because it's usually something else in the story than what's plainly there. Because there's plot, there's Hollywood plot, where it seems like A, B, C, but with a short story, with a novel, it's usually something other. And with Alina, I'll read you just a small part to see if it works, because it's really about trying to figure out why we're here as humans, right? Like what we're feeling, there's no right or wrong answers. It's all about the questions in writing stories or novels. It's not a political thing where you're like, here's my, it's not telling the whole, it's not telling what you know. It's telling what you don't know. And that's why we connect to it, because it's what we don't know that we connect to. But she says, Alina, in the story later on, she says, more and more she was growing tired of it and afraid, tired of following this guy every day. Not of that idiot drug dealer. She was afraid of herself and what she would do to him. And that's part of it, because there's real fear there that she could be violent with this person. And I'm going to read you, sorry, let me just get page 124. If I can swing it, hold on. Okay, sorry. She says, oh, you know what, I don't need to read that. Yeah, it's fine. Sorry. But this character is so complex, and I love her so much, and at the end of the story, you do not get a neat little bow. It does come to a really high point where she is in some trouble, face to face with the guy. And that's my other thing is you have to actually take the character somewhere. Well, or if you're struggling with a story, because all of you are in it, take them someplace. Put them in a situation. Take them to the coffee shop. Put a character in a situation, meaning take them out of that closed space that you can only, you're feeling stuck. So the wonderful thing is you can just all of a sudden be at the coffee shop, or be at the neighbor's house, or be at the prison visiting that person, right? I have a story in here called You're Here Now that started as a kind of a personal story, but I changed it completely, and that's also, you know, something that I love to do is start with what happens in my own life, and then as you write it and rewrite it, it becomes no longer you, it becomes something else entirely. But this story, again, I'll start with beginnings, because as you know, beginnings, especially in short stories, are really, really important.
You're Here Now?
It's called You're Here Now. And it starts, I knew Jimmy Pilata was my birth father in the same way I knew the brown stain on my forearm was a birthmark. Everyone has a birthmark somewhere. Birthmark, birth father. They carried the same weight in my life. Besides, the man had 8 other children. His plate runneth over. I've never met Jimmy Pilata, but I'm on the way to his funeral. He died in a car crash 2 nights ago. A hit and run on Highway 5, according to the Western Wheel, our local paper. Alone this morning in my apartment, I read the names of his children out loud from the obit page. Susan, Sean, Anna, Danny, Connie, Patty, Carrie, Christina. The half-siblings I've never spoken to, sorry. So this is a story, again, it didn't start this way when I first wrote it, about a girl who is on the way to her father's funeral, a man that she's never, ever spoken to, but she's going to his funeral, and she's got 8 other siblings, and she's about to meet them. Hell yeah, I want to know what happens next. And so she does go to the funeral, and the funeral home, and I don't know, I grew up Catholic and Italian, and it's an intense deal. So there's a row of, you know, mourning people, and she has to go, and so she does it. And she grew up completely differently than this Italian Catholic family. And it's kind of based on my own life, because it's what happened when I was a kid. Not a kid, but when my dad died. And there were 6 of us, not 8. And I decided to have 8 in this to make it really, you know, a big deal. And this woman showed up at my dad's funeral that I knew was a half-sibling. Anyway, but the story is nothing like, you know, my life in the end, except for all the details of the family, because you really have to have the fabric of what you know. Like, I knew what that funeral home looked like in my small town of Niagara Falls, Canada, where I grew up, because I was there. So that helped, the texture of it. But what I want to say about that story is that you all probably have writers' groups, right? And you work with each other. I hope you do. I have a few close friends that I do that with. It really is important. Or share it with your husband, or I don't know, your friends, or whoever you have. So long story short, she gets invited. The family actually knew about her. She gets invited to go to the family's house. And on the Sunday, when they all get together for pasta meal and the whole thing. So they say, listen, our dad's dead now, come over, right? And I had ended it there, the first round. I was like, okay, she gets to go to the family's thing. Everything's cool, or whatever, right? And my friend Louise Marburg, who's also a short story writer, she read it and she was like, you have to go. You have to make her go to that family's dinner. And I was like, no, that's too hard. There's 8 siblings. I can't write that, you know? And she was like, well, you have to. You have to. And that's the hardest thing sometimes. It's the ones that are really hard, and you're like, no, I can't write that scene. You have to do it. And it was really, 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 really hard. But I think that part is what makes the story. It was a very hard-won story. It took me years, maybe because of the personal origin, but she did go to the family house, and she did, you know, it was a very surprising ending for me. And I think that's a really important point about being surprised by your stories, by your characters. I never know how a story is going to go, and I just wait for the you know, the character to tell me, or to see what happens. And the ending in that story was, whoa, really shocking. I think it was Philip Roth who said, no surprise in the writer, no surprise in the reader. And it's a good one. It's already 10:50 something. I should probably... Am I good? Okay. Okay. I know you guys want to ask questions, if you have questions. Okay. I have so much to say. I'm so sorry. Okay. Thank you. Okay. I'm going back and forth, but you need to have a question, so I'll just say a little bit more. But about the point about it being about something else with a character, like you can tell the story, it's about this, this, and this, but the underlying simmering something with the character, my mom always said, it's not the mud on the floor. And that's like probably an Italian thing where it's like, it's not the mud on the floor that your father just walked in and traipsed through the kitchen. It's that he's an asshole and we're getting a divorce. Right? So it's it's not the mud on the floor, and I love that idea because that really does help me because it's something else that's going on. My dad was an asshole, but I loved him so much, and that's so complicated when that happens. I really think I'm just writing about my parents, and I have 5 older siblings, so I'm just always writing, and all I want is for them to love me. It's just ridiculous, right? That's all we want ever, is to be loved and, accepted. Okay. I wanted to read you 2 really great openings before I stop. So I have a story in here called Fort Pierce, Florida, that I wrote imagining the voice of Zora Neale Hurston. And you may all know who she was. Their eyes are watching God. I did not, because I'm Canadian and a little out of it, I did not know African American history of course I knew Civil War, but imagine growing up in a different country, maybe some of you have. But when I moved to Memphis, Tennessee, whoa, that was a shock. And so I did my MFA there. So I did like a side thing on African American literature. Anyway, I love Zora Neale Hurston, and I have a story written in the voice-ish of Zora Neale Hurston. Because she had to work as a maid. Even though she was famous, Zora Neale Hurston at the time, she worked as a maid in Fort Pierce, Florida. And I have her, and this was, just imagining what it would be like to be her, as a maid and going into the room of this white young guy who thinks he's like a Hemingway. He's got his bourbon sitting there, he's got his typewriter set up, and she has to clean his room. And they end up talking about writing, and he shows her some of his work. Anyway, but I'm a huge fan of Zora Neale Hurston, and I love the idea of writing from different perspectives, and I know that cultural appropriation is a huge thing right now, and I'd love to have that conversation with you later about that. Okay, so her book, Their Eyes Are Watching God, starts out, ships at a distance hone every man's wish on board. Isn't that gorgeous? And then, yes, ships at a distance hone every man's wish on board. That's so good. Yes. Do you know the Flannery Connor story? What is it called? You guys know it. Where she stops, the grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. Yeah. What is that called? Good man is hard to find. Yeah. That's I love that opening line. The grandmother didn't want to go to Florida. Well, why didn't she want to go to Florida? And then, of course, we see what happens. And then the other one that I was going to share from The Color Purple by Alice Walker. You better not never tell nobody but God. It'll kill your mammy. Not good. You better not never tell nobody but God. It'll kill your mommy. Well, what's the thing? And for sure, it took her a long time to get to that line to start. Okay. I want to answer your question.
Well, it's not a question.
Okay.
It's kind of to tease you, but
Do.
I remember hearing somebody said that when you write something based on your own memory,
Uh-huh.
then you change it up in
Yep.
the story, that after that you have trouble remembering what really happened because you wrote this other. And so when you were talking about the girl on her way to her father's funeral and all like that, and then you changed it up, have you had trouble with the memory?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I take ginkgo biloba. My brain memory is all messed up. And you know what? I love that because what's the truth? My sister, who's 2 years older than me, has a completely different. I always say somebody put something different in her Cheerios because we have a different memory. She sees it as sunny, and I'm like, that was terrible. That afternoon, I was dying inside, and she was just going on having fun. So memory, I think, yeah, I don't mind. I mean, I'm not like, oh, this is memoir. This is the book that I'm writing now. It's about my life. Will probably be, what do they call it, memoir fiction or something like that? Because you make up a lot of stuff, and you want it to sound good. You want the reader to be interested. You want to hold the reader. What do you write?
Oh, your short stories.
Yeah, but fiction, right? Yeah. I hope that helped. I mean, yeah.
That's true.
Yeah, Maddie.
So I'm curious, is,
Uh-huh.
we were talking about conflict. So is conflict the heart of your story, or is the heart of your story something else? I know you always say it's other, but.
Character is conflict to me. Character is conflict. Yeah. The character is the conflict. Always. Because it's, for me, we were talking earlier about being screenwriting and the difference between screenwriting and fiction writing. And my love of fiction writing is you get to tell what's going on in the person's head. Whereas screenwriting, it's just words. So you have to, in words, evoke the sentiment, evoke in action. But so the conflict is just as easy as saying, this guy is the reason for my daughter's troubles, right? Because that's the character, if that makes sense. But it can be, I mean, I don't focus on plot. It just comes out. You know what I mean? But it's, yeah, go ahead.
So is that conflict the heart of the story, or is the heart of the story something else?
Good question. I think the heart of the story is more about what it means to be human. And because you come away without a resolve, but you have a feeling. You want to have the sense of being taken on a journey without resolving the conflict. So it's all kind of entwined. It's necessary. I start off with conflict with so many writers, that are in my classes or whatever, because a lot of times there isn't. It's like, what do they want? Well, even if they want a glass of milk, it's like, well, okay, if they want a glass of milk, then what's underneath that? Why? They have an upset stomach because they're nervous about something or whatever. So yes, the conflict is, there's not one of us here that's not sitting with the conflict in our head while you're listening to me talk. You're sure, your whole background's going, I'm thinking about my kid and her not having money at where she is, and am I going to make it at 1 o'clock to go pick her up? It's just how we do things. And I'm kind of mad at her for something else. So, pardon?
The mud on the floor.
The mud on the floor. It's so good. Yeah. Anybody else? Maddie?
So you have like an anthology or a collection of short stories.
Yes.
How did you choose what stories to put in there, and is there a theme? How did you put that together?
I wanted it to be 10 stories. It's slim. It's 144 pages. But I wanted it to be 10 stories for some irrational reason. I had probably 14 to pick from, and I organized these in the way that I wanted some of the travel I've done to be in there. They're all about loss, longing, love gone wrong. It's everything about being human, but it's not just women's fiction. I write from the point of view of a man in Portland who flies all the way from Portland to Nairobi to go and get his son, who is working in an orphanage, and he wants to take him back home to help with his daughter who's having depression. And so it's fascinating to I can't say what it's about, but the 10 stories seem to go well together for me in that way. And I also won the W.S. Porter Prize for short story collections, and that's how I got it published. Thank you. So, yeah, it's hard to pick, though. Absolutely, that wasn't easy. It was hard won for sure.
Did you do that, or did the editor do that?
I did that.
Which
Yeah.
story was the winner?
Oh, it's the whole collection. The whole book won it. Yeah, thank you.
What's next?
I won the first story in the collection. If you read the first story, the character in that story, Daria, won't leave me. So I have about halfway through a novel returning. The story takes place in Greece, and it's a husband and wife that are on holiday together with their 26-year-old daughter, and the husband has an affair on the wife. Sorry, spoiler. While they're on vacation. And so the novel takes place when they get back to Toronto, and what happens next from her point of view. She's not going to leave him, but she's going to do something else entirely great, because she's 65 and fabulous.
That's a lot of mud.
Yeah, man. It's great. Sorry, go ahead.
Do you, since you're a photographer, I love taking pictures.
Uh-huh.
Do you ever go back to some of your shots and what you took a picture of is here, but then over here you blow it up and there's like these perfect characters. You see all this stuff you didn't really see in the picture that
Yeah.
you're taking, but you see it afterwards. So sometimes what I do is I'll go back to some photos of mine
Uh-huh.
and say I was in Amsterdam and the photos here, and then I blow up over here, and I remember just seeing in one of my pictures this photographer taking a picture of a woman that character itself was so like such a story. So then
Cool.
I started going through film pictures
Uh-huh.
and doing that, and then writing down characters that I found in the back of the photos. So do you ever go back and make a character out of like your old photography?
I don't, but I think that's a great idea for you, and then that's a great selling point. Talk about marketing. Then you keep the photograph
Right.
with it.
Right.
It is an exercise I do for students. If I don't take them I do take them to Circle, but I bring in interesting photos from magazines. I cut out pictures a lot, and then I make them write a story based on what they see, with obviously more than one person. And those turn out really well. So I think it's a perfectly great idea. I think do that. That's amazing.
It was one of those things because I would always say, like, the interesting part of this picture is behind the scene.
Right,
Like,
yeah.
I remember just catching a few people in Paris, like, I didn't even take that of that. I wasn't even shooting that. I was shooting something else, and all of a sudden, the guy behind these people were like, wow.
Amazing. I see that. I mean, you get a lot of publicity for that because it's a really great idea. Don't tell anyone. Do it.
Well, it's between you and the 80 of us.
Yeah, right? Hi, yeah.
So you said that you won, or that you got your book published based on the fact that you won this prestigious prize.
Uh-huh.
Does that mean that you published it yourself first and submit it for the prize, or did you submit something that was unpublished for a prize? How does that work?
Unpublished. Yeah, I'd never done self-publishing. So I just sent it in on the chance that I would. It's a really great press in North Carolina. It's female owned and run, and it's called Regal House. And so, yeah, it was just sending it into that prize. I got it published. So they did the publishing for me.
So how have you found Regal House as a publisher? Because I'm familiar with them.
Yeah, send to them. They're fantastic. Yeah, I really, really like them. It's been amazing.
Go ahead, sir, somebody else.
Yeah.
So do you feel that, as far as short stories go,
Uh-huh.
that you should leave the reader with some hope?
I do.
Leave your reader with some what?
I don't know. What I say sometimes is the endings, you can't tie things up in a bow, of course, because that's boring, and that life is not like that. It's like having a moment of light or a moment of clarity. That's all there is at the end of the story, where you feel something, you're still in the story, but then, like the first story, I think she sits down and has a cup of tea with the light coming through, and it's, her daughter's making, it's a scene, it's a moment of clarity. And that's what we get in life, moments of clarity. There's no great prize of happiness every day, no sirree Bob. You get these moments of clarity, and that's you string those together in between all the crap of life, I think. And that's why, because you see yourself in these characters that are struggling. And I love that. So yeah, that's how I do endings, moment of clarity. And everyone is different. But
well, that's truth.
Truth, exactly. That's what you're looking for.
Clarity.
Yes.
It isn't always forever.
Perfect. Yes. I love that. It is. It's what we want, a moment of truth. And that's what we want. We don't want to pretend. 90% of the time we're pretending a lot. And so you want to have, okay, what is the truth? Well, right now I'm just going to sit and have a cup of tea. I don't know what's going to happen later. Yes, Larry.
What do you see as you're working with students?
Uh-huh.
What do you see in their writing that is perhaps indicative of a different style, a different tone, a different voice?
Zombies. A lot of zombies, which makes me crazy. I don't know. I don't deal in zombies, but
The students or the story?
a little of both. No, I have really, really smart students at Chapman, but they're very much engaged in, I love fantasy, but you still have to tell a story. A lot of them get very involved in the ideas of, Philahana from this made-up planet, and then all the little beings that live on the planet, and then world building, which is totally cool. I still have to feel something for the characters. So I do try and educate myself as much as possible of what's current to keep going in that classroom, because, yeah, but you know what? It's discouraging sometimes, because the only way to become a better writer is to read. And read good stuff, and keep reading good stuff. And it's really hard for me to get them to read.
Really?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. Sorry.
Go. And then one last question.
You're writing dialogue.
Uh-huh.
Do the characters lead the dialogue, or do you lead the dialogue?
The characters.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know what they're going to say.
Okay. I promised you we would keep this limited. Okay, go ahead, Lee, and then.
Okay, yeah. No, that's fine.
Can you talk a little bit more about how you, or give us a couple of examples of the moment of clarity that you end the story with?
Yes. Let me think.
That's a good question.
That's a hard one.
It's something I've struggled with, so I want to hear your.
It's not easy, and that's why I say it's not easy. You have to kind of, every story is different. So the one that I was telling you about, the Have Mercy on Us, the one that I was describing. Well, you'd have to know the whole story for me to give you examples. So it might be difficult for me. Pardon?
Buy the book.
Buy the book, read the stories, and you'll see how to write a good, a clear ending. But I can talk to you about that after. I can't sort of, without knowing the stories, and I don't know what you've read. What's your example of a good ending?
Well, I love this turning the tables, but I am struggling with writing a moment of clarity to end a novel,
Uh-huh.
and I haven't found it yet. That's actually why I'm here.
Yeah. Yeah, you have to just find out do like a whole thing on the side. What's this novel about?
I've been on
Side character thing. And then just go, okay, what's my truth?
What your personal idea of a moment?
It's what Larry said about the truth. It really is finding that one thing without overwriting it. But on the side, when you're writing your notes to yourself about what is this novel, why am I telling the story, just babble on. Babble on into your notes, and then you'll look at it and you'll say, oh, that's it. Because I don't know, without having read your novel, what your moment of clarity is. It's the hardest thing to do, and so it's like, oh.
That's why I asked.
Yeah. Well, good luck with it.
And it could matter, like if you're writing from a psychopath's perspective, their moment of clarity might be different than if you're writing from a character that's a police officer or or a spy or
I could recommend a ton of stories and things to read based on that. Yeah.
Well, they used to use the word forever at the end of stories, happily ever after forever, and it isn't. That was never true. But they could live happily, but it's not forever. There's always something coming. You may make it through your trial or whatever it is, the mountain you got to climb, but there's something that'll come up too.
Right. All happy families are alike. All unhappy families are a short story you should write.
All right.
Yeah.
One more. Yes.
Lisa, regarding teaching, do you belong to the NCTE, National Council of Teachers of English?
No, I don't.
Do you recommend joining any groups?
I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't really know it, but I'm on something. Do you guys know Barbara DeMarco Barrett?
Yes.
Writers something, she got me to join, but yeah, it's so hard to keep. Writers on Writing is her thing. Yeah, I support her podcast. Tell me what I should do. I don't know, but I don't really. But that's probably because I'm not aware of it.
I'm gonna cut you off because you have to go pick up your daughter.
No, I think I've got until 1 to
But
get to.
that was such a nice reminder, though. When you
Yes.
said that, I was like, okay, I know what you're saying.
Thank you.
But I hope you guys enjoyed this today. Can we give her a round of applause, please?
Thank you.
And I would love for you to come back
Oh, thank you.
and talk about Neil Gaiman and Elmore
Oh, yeah,
Leonard
my
and
stars.
people
Yeah.
that and how the paparazzi. So
Yeah.
when your memoir is ready,
Yes.
we want you to come back.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.